This is the Option O Lagom O1, the priciest single-dosing espresso and filter coffee grinder we've tested so far, and surprise, actually an absolute benchmark in many categories. A genuinely standout performer. Whether it ends up at Michel's place, shining next to his espresso machine, or becomes my new filter coffee grinder, you'll find out in this video. Here we are now with another grinder from Option O, the Lagom O1. It's a further development of the P100, which looks just as ungainly and is similarly massive, much like that grinder. And we didn't buy this grinder, we borrowed it. And not from Option O either, but from our good friend, German Brewers Cup champion Urs Rotzinger. He actually bought this grinder because it's the very one used for filter coffee at the World Championship. He offered to lend it to us. It'd also be interesting for him to hear about the particle distribution findings. And we also made sure to properly season the grinder. That's important too.
So Andrea personally took care of that?
Exactly. Thanks, Urs, for lending it, and we are really looking forward to your journey to the Burrs Cup World Championship. We'll naturally be documenting that a bit too. So we've now taken a look at it for espresso, and of course for filter coffee too. First and foremost, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. What was your very first impression? You do have the P64 at home, right? Yeah. So in that sense, you've got a certain...
So I mostly keep the P64 at home because Andrea didn't want it at the academy. And there's an extra grinder, and I really do need a grinder between tests sometimes indeed. Without the water spray, it's crap, but with it, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So to explain, that was just a brief summary of the P64 test. I actually wanted to show the contrast. So do you see a similar level of processing quality? Do you see the same language? How did you react to the grinder when you first saw it?
Hey, it's a really chunky beast. I mean, those unbelievably gigantic burrs need to have plenty of room somewhere. But it's got 98s in there, a really massive burr. If you compare it to the 55s they've actually got in the Eureka, honestly. That's absolutely insane, the grinding surface they've got in there. And I'm totally with you on that. The build quality is exactly what I've come to expect from Option O. It features that insanely high-grade aluminum throughout. I really like the dosing finger we know from the Casa, from the cheapest one. Otherwise, it's quite simple. It feels super premium. You can just get to the conical burr or the burrs. It's all been thought through, and it's just far more high-end outside, much more solid and premium. Whether you really need that for good coffee, we can just put that out there.
Yeah, we can brew good coffee with it. We'll talk about that soon. But you're right, of course, and it's all solid, all sturdy, and really, really classy, genuinely so. Right now, I would say it's not exactly aerodynamic. And also, well, looking at this, we simply have here a truly massive, bold statement of pure robustness. No elegance like we'd expect from, I don't know, something like a Cerno or even a P64 for that matter. And you just pay 3,000 euros or francs for it. That's pretty crazy if you ask me. Really hard to justify though, if I'm honest.
That's pretty wild. If I picture that at home, we always say the grinder can be more expensive than the coffee machine. I have to say nowadays it's actually gotten a little bit different. That's already 3,000 euros for a grinder on the side. At that point, my budget would definitely be out the window.
Yeah, so it's definitely top tier high end. And the question is then what actually justifies this price being even higher now compared to a P64 or other grinders in that class. But build quality is the number one thing. And you've already mentioned a few points. Let's just quickly open up the grinder so we can then talk in detail about the cleaning quality and that cleaning potential. We gave this a very high rating, quite simply because it is just so easy to use. First, we only went up.
Then turn, then up and back out. And then there are these two knobs. It's almost at the point of being tool-free, but they're tightened so much you can't loosen them with your fingers, not even slightly at all, to be honest. So you need something to go in between, like an impact driver, or Option O just does it with a thin screwdriver. Stab it through once and then twist it off. But I would say it's so close to being tool-free that I would actually call it tool-free. Pretty much tool-free, to be honest.
That's why we also said we'd indeed rate the cleanability. So opening the mill itself as as very good, even if you need some kind of pin just to move this a bit. But the key thing, and it's brilliant, is you can simply dial back to the same grind setting. Right, so no gimmick, you're at the same grind setting. And that's, of course, awesome.
Absolutely, and I really think that it's a ton of fun and it's awesome.
You can really see the sturdiness in the dimensions, and it starts with the weight itself. Just think about it. There are lots of espresso machines that are lighter.
It weighs 15 kilos. Honestly, my first association was with a classic dual boiler machine, which weighs around 15 kilos. Others use them to build machines. Option O simply makes a grinder. Yeah, it's about 17 centimeters wide, roughly 35 centimeters high and 30 centimeters deep, a bit more with the plug. It gives you the option to set the RPM anywhere from 200 up to
1700. That's really an amazingly wide range. You hardly ever find that at all. There's a massively overbuilt motor inside. It handles high speeds, it handles low speeds, and even at those low speeds, it has enough torque to power through the beans without ever stalling. That's truly impressive, and you can really see it in the grinding speed. Right, Michel? We measured it. At the highest setting, it grinds 75 grams in just 10 seconds.
For a home setup, this is almost surreal. These are figures we only see from really powerful commercial grinders, the top tier ones. It's simply and utterly unbelievable, honestly beyond anything you'd expect.
Yes, well, we've very rarely seen this in this category before. I believe the Pro 83V was in this league, but otherwise there are almost no other grinders. And you can see that in the grind for the 18 grams. And not to forget, we grind at espresso grind, not filter coffee grind, but espresso grind. We're also at 4 seconds. That is, of course, the incredible motor and the high speed, but it is also naturally those unbelievably large burrs which already deliver such a high uniformity grind. They yield a specific particle distribution, we'll discuss soon. We measured those again together with the Zurich University of Applied Sciences. Not some DIY micron test, but actually really high precision. And that then leads to a rather interesting espresso grind and also a filter coffee grind as well. What I'm getting at, Michel, is that even with these big burrs, despite the high speed, we hardly see any noticeable heating. And there it's even a little lower than with the P64. We're still staying under 30 degrees. So that's brilliant. With this, you can really grind those high volumes, those large quantities. You don't get any noticeable warming, which might then have a negative effect on the coffee's taste as a whole.
Well, it really is. It's actually a commercial grinder. Perhaps the workflow is a bit too, very smooth. We're just getting to that, but truly everything is perfectly coordinated. But you can still weigh the coffee. But I could imagine for a high-end specialty shop that you just have your little bottles with your 19, 20 grams and just dump them in. You stick a portafilter underneath, 4 seconds, bam, portafilter's full, nice craft paper revolution. Doable, absolutely.
Absolutely. Or for filter coffee, for example. I could easily see myself using it as a filter coffee grinder, if only we had the space, which is a bit of an issue here. But otherwise, it's a perfect fit for
home.
For home, I have enough space on this counter. But honestly, even in a commercial setting, it would be phenomenal, especially for high volumes, like when you need to grind 40 grams at once, to then, say, brew 700 milliliters in a batch brew. That would be quite interesting indeed. What this doesn't work for here is brewing the whole bag, grinding it. So, for example, we also have an EK43 there to grind the coffee specifically for guests who want to buy or obtain it pre-ground. So we can have it run through once. We do that on request. That wouldn't really work here because that bag just doesn't fit under here. That's a bit of a shame. By the way, that would have been awesome because let's talk about static for a second.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Absolutely, because this is next level and it's way better than other grinders we're used to.
Yeah.
The P64, that's a level in which...
No, it's the gleiche...
It's part of the parent company, the same team. But you can't use the P64 without water spray. In this case, you can forget about it completely. Of course, you can use it if you want. But if you want to grind straight into the portafilter and use the dosing ring, you'll get a bit of static. Yeah, a little on the rim is totally fine. If you grind straight into the cup, you get a bit of static too, but it's totally fine. Nice.
Now you're running off with me again. You didn't even mention that both are included. It's included. A dosing cup that you can grind directly into. You can place it right here. It snaps on magnetically, just like that. That was the one from the
holder.
Now it's sitting in the right place. It's a little bit off to the side, actually, just like the small casa there, really.
Yeah.
By the way, the little casa here is the smaller one. Design-wise, it's also actually a little bit off to one side. It grinds cleanly right into it. Michel, you have probably something to say about that?
Definitely. I mean, the unit itself is great. The coffee falls out perfectly. Everything works wonderfully. It's just that when you're forced to work with such a large dosing cup, it simply feels a bit unnatural for the workflow. Well, I think the P64 handles this much better. Of course, that's simply due to the wider clearance. So, they want a snug fit all the way to the top, ensuring that the coffee, which is slightly statically charged, falls right into the cup. I can kind of see that, but workflow-wise, I don't find it all that comfortable. I once went to someone's place who had the grinder at home. He used the cup for grinding, but then reportioned the coffee from that cup into our standard dosing cup.
That's really an interesting workflow. What you can do, and that's definitely my personally preferred go-to workflow for espresso. I like to use this little device. It comes included in the box. You can easily snap it into place right here or just slide it in. It also attaches magnetically, so it positions itself nicely. One might ask, where's the correct position? But it sits perfectly clean. In fact, for me, it sits even cleaner than the dosing cup, because the dosing cup unfortunately keeps getting stuck at the exact points where the portafilter holder is supposed to attach. All right, let's move over here and shortly hook in the portafilter for a moment. Michel, we can just slide it in right there. In this case, it's the Maro portafilter.
Without ring?
I'll just show it quickly, like this. But of course, it also works this way. It's got a magnet, and now it just snaps in here perfectly, really nicely.
So even the Maro portafilter doesn't touch the table. That's quite an achievement.
Exactly. Similar to other grinders, we just saw that again with the E64WS from Malkönig. Then it just hangs down like that, and here it still has enough clearance.
Is that just enough?
This is actually the right position to make an espresso. And we'll talk about retention volume too, but we'll save that until we get to the espresso. What are you treating us to? With such fine coffee? That's your pleasure mode again. So it's Colombian.
Ulieth. Is it actually Ulieth for real now?
I don't know how to pronounce that in Spanish.
I don't know yet how to pronounce it. We still need to ask Philipp.
Actually, you say Ulieth. Yeah, sure. You would. I knew someone, she was called Judith, also with a Y. Yes, I actually find it to be a very floral coffee. Super elegant, beautiful body, incredible clarity that this grinder extracts perfectly.
It's still soft, elegant. The acidity is nicely integrated, I would say, and plenty of sweetness overall.
Yes, very soft. I'd say it's more on the gentle side, not a heavy body, but a very elegant one. Yes, you really feel it along the sides of the tongue.
It dances. Seriously, I'm just genuinely having so much fun with this coffee because it's simply, I mean, this is our orange line. And we always bring in new seasonal coffees that tend to lean toward the elegant side. But this one, it's packed with elegance and insane complexity, yet it has so much sweetness that I truly believe it's the kind of coffee that actually forgives you if you make a few small mistakes during preparation.
With a good grinder indeed. And even then, it still tastes delicious. That's what makes a good grinder. The particle distribution is excellent. We're at 183 on the T4 setting and at 182 on the T7. That really says a lot about the grind accuracy. You can get back to exactly the same spot. I actually prefer this particular size range between 180 and 220 to 150.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's easier to set up, because you don't really have to react so drastically with flow profiling at all anymore. You can also do that with an 8.5 bar shot, so you really don't need a grinder that can do flow profiling or pressure profiling at all. You're right at home in the light roast segment. You can really pull them off perfectly. But you can also say make it just a little bit darker.
Absolutely. And a bit of context, in that 150 range, we're often dealing with multi-purpose, all-purpose burrs. And they're just pretty tricky to brew. And on top of that, there's simply this main thing. The distribution is so broad that the coffee often gets scattered and loses focus when we push beyond 330 microns. Whereas here, we're miles away from that range. So it presents a very interesting vertical distribution profile. It's definitely fun to work with for espresso, and we'll dive into filter coffee next.
Let's just take a quick look at the retention volume. That's good. Honestly, that's unbelievable. Because the large grinding burr is absolutely massive and really stands out visually.
Especially when you imagine looking at this grinding chamber and this airspace between the drivers, which are those screwed on or connected components that actually carry the coffee outside the burrs up to the exit, so to speak. And there is so much air, really. Normally, if this were a grinder that hadn't been well designed to guide the coffee forward toward the outlet, the coffee would really fly in automatically, then it fills and fills. And with a grinder like that, we'd probably be talking about a retention volume of about 18 grams because there's so much room. But this one has...
That's a bit much.
But if you look at it from a technical perspective, in terms of its physical footprint, it's not far off from a large commercial grinder.
Okay, we need to quickly go over the details. You haven't said them yet, and neither have I. We're at 0.1 in the permanent retention volume and 0.4 in the temporary retention volume, so 0.5 overall in total. If you use the auto mode, and auto mode does something interesting, it grinds at the grind speed you set, then kind of speeds off afterward. So that means when the grinder hits the final phase or is basically done with the grinding, it grinds one more time faster and then pushes out a few more grams. And then use the knocker, then you'll be at about 0.4, otherwise you're more like around 0.7, 0.8 in the temporary retention volume. So that's definitely a good feature.
And it also stops automatically. So it senses if there's resistance and would then just stop once after that spin up. Another thing to note is that if you toss 18 grams in there, 18 grams will come back out again, just the same.
Yeah, and if you use ADT, you get 18.1 out or 18.15 because that makes the whole thing heavier. So that's still interesting. The measurement there was really interesting. For 5 runs in a row, we got 17.9 and then always 18 with ADT. So water droplets versus static, which is almost non-existent, we've already mentioned. We had the measurements, almost all of them, at 18.1 or 18.2. I couldn't help but chuckle.
It's the water.
I was also wondering how much RDT, how many water droplets did our dear colleague Andrea add in there?
He fixed it to 2 sprays, using one fixed water spray that he consistently uses.
Yeah. But it obviously got worse, so more and more kept coming out. That was the moisture.
And just a little additional note, since you probably experienced this in your single dosing routine too, you put in 18 grams and very often only get 17.9 grams back. This is due to several reasons. One reason is a rounding difference on the scale. And the second part, what happens during grinding, is that we simply release an enormous amount of CO2 into the room. And that CO2 can actually make the difference of those 0.1 grams due to rounding. And that's why we see that 0.15 G variance even in the top range. Though this grinder isn't quite there yet, it's still excellent. You simply lose CO2 during grinding and thus weight.
Yeah, so again, we're not talking about the best grinders when it comes to temporary retention volume or the single dosing retention volume area. But frankly, that's hardly what you'd expect from such large format burrs. That's why we're still euphoric, or rather very positive. Despite this compact format, we're still getting such excellent results. So, dear Michel, these dimensions, this powerful motor and these massive burrs lead to a noise level that is truly off the charts. The grinder really isn't elegant, and it's not quietly elegant either. We're up at almost 90 decibels. And that would already be the top volume category at 89. Yet it still manages to sneak its way into this mid-range bracket. But actually, one really must say that it is truly a monster when it comes to noise levels, indeed.
Only for 4 seconds.
Yeah, definitely. And for quick shots in between, no problem at all. But this isn't a grinder you can use with elegance in an open setting, to be honest. Quietly grinding a coffee in some stunning design environment. No, this is a grinder that says, I am a grinder. I am here to grind, and I am loud. And that's exactly what this machine does.
And I also think when you switch it on, the bass tone already has a certain, it kind of sounds like a turbine, really. Yeah, it's already powerful. Plus, you've got the higher speeds and then it cuts off again. But you can tell there's a slightly overbuilt motor doing the work, quite noticeably so.
All right, now let's take a look at how this motor grinds for filter coffee and check out the results with our dear colleague. So Michael, great to have you here too.
Glad I'm in.
Now we're going to do the filter coffee test, or rather show you how we make filter coffee using the O Lagom O1 option. You've already brewed a lot of filter coffee with it since we're currently developing a protocol, and I shouldn't say too much, you're also taking a look at the X Bloom. How was your first take on it?
For the grinder, absolutely fantastic. It's an ultra solid machine. It's probably one of the largest filter coffee grinders I've ever seen. And when you look at the grounds and brew coffee with them, it just performs rock solid. It's a very, very even grind. You get exactly what you put in, and the coffee tastes pretty good overall, really.
So your impression was that you brewed really quite tasty coffees with it indeed. We've just run a quick test here. We have 2 different RPM settings, once at maximum, once at minimum. That means we're revving it up to 1700 here and down to just 200 there. And we'll taste that in a moment and also tell you once again how the coffee actually tastes to us personally. Now, first for the comparison, once we've done that, we'll rate the grinder as a whole. Michael, can I get you a cup?
I'd love to. One for you.
And we've just brewed our Amigo. That's also the coffee we use to test all the filter coffee grinders and now the filter coffee machines. That's the filter coffee we always have all year round. It has a specific flavor profile. It's actually kind of more on the chocolatey side.
Yeah, a bit caramelly, right. It actually does taste really, really good.
It appeals to almost everyone. It's such an approachable profile. That's the idea with the grinders too, that we've got a coffee we can rely on consistently. Now we have the 2 different versions. They're different cups.
What'd you say? First off, to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised by both of them, how tasty they actually are, really, honestly. Both are incredibly clean. I find the cup on the right, the one you brewed, has a bit more acidity, but also a bit less body, and consequently a bit less sweetness as well. But both are very clear in terms of flavor, and the bitterness is incredibly low in both, even though this is actually one of those filter coffees that tends to have a bit more bitterness. I mean, I'm pleasantly surprised. I actually think yours has even less bitterness. Mine has a slightly drier aftertaste. Honestly, I wouldn't have expected that at all, given the high RPMs. People often say that if you drop the RPM, you get a narrower main peak and therefore more clarity. But the grinder itself already delivers exceptional clarity thanks to that incredibly narrow particle distribution. And in that respect, it's almost unnecessary to drop the speed any further. Both cups are excellent. They're incredibly well balanced internally. Absolutely. But if you want that room for maneuver, you've got it. The cups are definitely quite distinct from each other. Yep. And that gives you the freedom to really extract exactly what you're looking for in this coffee. That's the grinder from the World Championship. Burrs lent it to us, you know. I think it'll be fun to work with. I think so too. Honestly, you're always a bit skeptical at first when it comes to championship level equipment. But once you realize it's good, it becomes quite fun.
Absolutely. It's a joy. And honestly, looking back over the years, there have been far worse options out there. So you can definitely work with it very well, quite comfortably, and without much trouble. Now keep in mind, this is a filter coffee from our entry-level range, the kind designed to work reliably and appeal to every guest in your house. It's perfectly suited for that. But here's the thing. We can say the exact same thing for coffees that are significantly more complex. So, I don't know, an Ichamama, an Ethiopian filter coffee. Because of that narrow main peak, you get a lot of clarity in the cup and you still have a pleasant sweetness. And the coffees are balanced, which I think is pretty cool. Michael, how far along are you with your Worlds prep?
Yeah, it's all still at the starting line. I just got started. I'm kind of in the experimentation phase. I'm just trying to figure out what I actually need to do for the World Cup.
Michael was indeed just recently in Germany. The new German Coffee and Good Spirits winner will be competing at the World Championship in Germany this coming June as well, of course. So we're also making a few more videos about spirits and coffee and how they actually work together. Thanks for joining me here today for this filter coffee.
So much fun.
And on that note, we'll head back to Michel and the wrap-up to put everything into perspective once more, briefly. So, dear Michel, did the brew actually taste good? Now comes the crucial discussion. Do we give it back to Urs once again right now?
Of course, we will give it right back to our friend Burrs, absolutely.
But at the same time, we could consider whether we shouldn't just buy our own and introduce it directly in the hospitality sector. I personally find it really interesting for the hospitality sector for filter coffee because it's so fast and we also have to grind large batches. And because with the RPM, it gives us another tool that lets us influence espresso potential and filter coffee potential too with greater precision and control. By the way, RPM is one of the reasons we said we'd move up into the top category of the espresso potentials rating. This particle distribution combined with the RPM, that's really primarily that large range 200 to 1700. You can't really expect much more from a grinder, especially in practice, since you could just swap the burrs and that would open up a whole new range of possibilities. A grinder you'd have at home? Yeah, sure.
Yep, I have to.
Room on your desk? Yep.
I do. Currently, there are 2 grinders there, even 3. But that's a completely different topic. You're testing.
Do you know what I really like about this? We actually have excellent grind consistency reproducibility. And I could see myself using this grinder for both filter coffee and espresso as well. And you know why? Because you don't have to turn it more than once. So you pretty much remain in the same position.
Still in the usual range? Yeah, absolutely. And you could even work with lower RPMs for the filter coffee to produce fewer fines. Yes, it is. I mean, wow, that is quite a hefty price tag, no doubt about it. Honestly, if I try to picture myself spending 1,500 euros on a grinder, my reaction would be, well, if you want to do both and you don't want to buy 2 separate grinders or even get a manual one, though there are some of those that quickly reach the 250, 300 euro range.
So look, you're currently saving up for a gravel bike. Once you're done with that, you can think about whether to save for the O1 from Option O. I could very well imagine getting one for myself. I would even have enough space for it. Let me just have a little inner dialogue with myself about it. Otherwise, we'll just give it back to Urs for now and say thank you again. And good luck on your journey. If you enjoyed the video, please do feel free to just leave a like. That would make us very happy. But what would make us even happier, or rather, what would make us additionally happy, is if you follow the link below. That way you can easily just sign up for our brand new weekly newsletter. With this newsletter, you'll find out every week which video is coming. Sometimes you even get an early sneak peek at the video. Sometimes there's a bit of behind the scenes, and we thought that way we could just bring you along a little more and let you vote every now and then on which video and which test we put out next. So if you want to join in, just follow the link right down below to really take part. Until then, we'll probably have another cup of coffee now. Yeah, and we wish you a really awesome week. See you soon. Time to clear up.
But honestly, it's some really awesome coffee. You can hardly mess it up.
Philipp bought this so you don't outshine him when making espresso later. Is the camera already on? Really? Yes. If it's good, it might end up staying in my little hut instead of going back to Earth. It might end up staying in my little hut. Common. Your house is bigger than my house. Michael, before I finally let you go, I have to ask, how is your World Cup prep coming along at the moment?
That has just now started up.
Michael,